Hey, over there, Joe Lunchbox.
Enjoy Nightingale.
And today we have landed right here in New York City. Now, we like to go to all different museums, and occasionally new museums pop up here in New York. In fact, there's actually a Titanic pop-up museum here in New York City that we wanted to check out.
Yep.
But we figured, why not start this video somewhere else? So that's what we're going to show you. Then we're going to head over to that Titanic pop-up museum. So if you like this kind of stuff, you should like this video, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, comment down below. But it's time to get a little Titanic-y. So step right up. Let's go for this ride. So right here, we're at South Street Seaport. That's why he says South Street Seaport Museum. But here, this lighthouse is the Titanic Memorial Lighthouse. This lighthouse is a memorial to the passengers, officers, and crew who died as heroes when the steamship Titanic sank after collision with an iceberg. Latitude 4146 north, longitude 5014 west, April 15th, 1912. This lighthouse was originally erected by public subscription in 1913. It stood above the East River on the roof of the old Seamen's Church Institute at the corner of South Street and Coinage Slip. From 1913 to 1967, the time ball at the top of the lighthouse would drop down the pole to signal 12 noon to the ships in the harbor. This time ball mechanism was activated by a telegraph signal from the National Observatory in Washington, D.C. That's pretty cool. In July 1968, the Seamen's Church Institute moved to its present quarters at 15 State Street. That year, the Titanic Memorial Lighthouse was donated by the Kaiser Nelson Steel and Salvage Corporation to the South Street Seaport Museum. It was erected on the corner at the entrance of the museum complex in May 1976 with funds provided by the Exxon Corporation. I wish the ball on top still would drop at 12 noon, because that would be a sight to see. I don't think that's operational anymore. As we continue on our journey, making our way to the Titanic exhibit, we have come to the Hudson River, at which once was Pier 54, now the entrance to Little Island. By the way, that is a weird looking island. It is cool. I love that we're like, let's just build a park over the water with these crazy looking pylons. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about this old rusty arch, because this arch is important for Titanic history. We also have a picture with the RMS Titanic and the RMS Carpathia. Now you may be wondering, is that another ship that sunk? No, you see what happened is, after the Titanic left, hit the iceberg, was sinking in 1912, well, they needed to be rescued. And 710 passengers were rescued on this ship, the Carpathia, and brought. The Titanic was actually supposed to land at Pier 59, a few blocks north, but the Carpathia came here to Pier 54, docked, bringing those people here. Imagine you thinking you're taking this luxury cruise across country, and this is where you end up. It's just crazy to picture that the Titanic brought to you by White Star Lines, the RMS Titanic, British passenger liner, crossing the North Ocean, and it hit that iceberg on April 15th, 1912, during her maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City. It's crazy to think there was an estimate of 2,224 passenger crew, and more than 1,500 died, making it the deadliest sinking of a single ship up to that time. What I think is crazy is that number that I said, estimated of 2,224 passengers and crew. The Titanic had 20 lifeboats, which could hold up to 1,178. What were they thinking? They doubled the amount of people that could fit on the lifeboats. Yeah, you wonder why 1,500 people died and only 710 survived on that boat. And that Carpathia, it took 3 days after it got those people from the disaster site back to New York. Imagine it docked here at 9:30 p.m. on April 18th. And they were greeted by 40,000 people waiting in this heavy rainstorm to bring relief of clothing and transportation to shelters. And they had organizations like the Women's Relief Committee, Travelers Aid Society of New York, and the Council of Jewish Women, among other organizations here trying to help all those people out. But you might be like, that's some crazy history from this little pier that we could just see some of the old wood pylons next to the little island. And you're like, was there any more history that ever happened here?
Was there?
Well, actually, yes, I'm glad you asked, Joy. You see, we actually have another ship right here. You see the RMS Lusitania, because on May 7, 1915, the Lusitania, among the fastest and most luxurious ocean liner ever built, departed this pier. And the Lusitania, as it was crossing the Atlantic Ocean, was supposedly accidentally shot by a German U-boat. They didn't realize what they were shooting their torpedoes at. Obviously, the Lusitania is another famous ship that sunk. It's just weird that the Titanic sunk and the passengers that survived were brought here. Then 3 years later, another ship left this port and was sunk by a German U-boat. Those just weird coincidences. Obviously, the sinking Lusitania was one of the catalysts that got America into World War I. It's just a little history. Right here, which now is this cool little park. Titanic the Exhibition. It's cool how they did it, as if we're waiting outside the ship, about to get on, is the line we're waiting to actually get in. Right now we're doing an audio guide, and you hear the water going, and they're talking about the life jacket. We should have a life jacket from the Titanic. They're talking how these gentlemen set up the plan to build a massive ship that'd be the most comforting. And there was 3 ships: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Gigantic. We're seeing pictures of the Titanic being built. It's crazy. 3,000 people over 2 years it took to build that. With some advertising materials of the time, like the cigarette tin advertising the Olympic and the Britannic. We have Thomas McCulley's Tools, a carpenter who helped build the ship. It's funny, J.P. Morgan helped fund it. Finally, I have some Titanic stuff. We have a lunch menu for the launch of the Titanic. Edward John Smith, the captain of the Titanic. We have an official passenger list approved by the White Star. We have William Murdoch's telescope that he was looking at. He's the one that decided to close the watertight doors. There he is. He was also in charge of lifeboats on the starboard deck. He was letting men on lifeboats even though they weren't supposed to. So his side of the ship, they were letting men on. And they say 80% of the men that lived are all thanks to him. We have letters Murdoch wrote to his family. Picture of the first class lounge. And since the Olympic was almost like Titanic, we have a window from the first class lounge of the Olympic. We have a model. Here's the port side. But on the starboard side, we could look inside. You see the boilers and the engine. This last tower was fake just to make it look big. So if there was fake photos of Titanic, they sometimes have smoke coming out, but there wouldn't have been smoke coming out. It is crazy when you look at the model and you see how few lifeboats there were for all those people. We have a map where the route was and where the line is right there. That's where it crashed. We have a postcard here from this gentleman who is a third class passenger Carl Robert Carlson. And that gentleman, Carl, didn't make it. But this woman, Vellum, who was also third class, made it. Here's all of her stuff from it. A third class passenger. And the rate was equivalent to 1 year of pay. It wasn't only the poor. People had to save for 5 years to get that one ticket. This gentleman passed away. They found his body, but they buried him at sea. But here is some of the items that they found on his body. It's crazy. The top deck was only for the wealthy people. So for the first class were only allowed. Oh no, this is the second class deck, they said. And here's one of those deck chairs. Wow, would have been a blanket provided to the passengers to protect them from the cold. Saying the woman that the movie Titanic's based off would have been this woman, and this would have been the real life necklace. This is actually from the Olympic, but this first class staircase, we have a part of it from the Titanic. This is what a third class cabin would have looked like. Imagine having to share it with other people. We have a second class dining room, and you see those chairs there? We actually have one sitting here. It's a reconstruction of one of the corridors from the first class cabins. Thinking of names like Astor and Guggenheim that would have been in these cabins. It's a replica of the first class suite. It's another part of that first class cabin. They're saying that the highest paid for a first class suite would have been equivalent to $80,000. That's not what they paid then, it's what it would be equivalent to now. We have a first class bathroom. It's from the Olympic. None of the ones from the Titanic have been recovered. This would have only been in the first class passengers' bedrooms. They were the only ones that had their own wash closet. We actually have a piece of coal from the Titanic. I actually have a piece of coal from the Titanic, but it's a tiny little piece of the Titanic. Millimeters long. But it is cool that I own a piece from that coal that was on the Titanic. That's crazy. 78% of third class passengers died, compared to 38% of first class that died. Please gently touch the iceberg. I couldn't fathom being in water that cold. No. You would be done if you weren't in a lifeboat. We're seeing how the ship hit the iceberg.
One of the few full family members to actually survive.
It's this Louise, her daughter. Louise Kink and the father made their way into the lifeboats, lucky enough, and one of the only few families surviving. And there are the shoes that the daughter Louise was wearing. We have a replica of the radio room where they were trying to send Morse code distress calls. Alternate name being CDQ and SOS calls, trying to get people to know that the ship was sinking. They were saying the Carpathia, 58 miles away, was the first one to respond. But he was a postal clerk trying to protect the mail, but he lost life. What's interesting about this museum exhibit, how they're really pairing photos with the stories, showing people actual photos of people who passed away or some that survived. They said as the ship was going down, these people just continued to play, doing their job. None of the 8 musicians survived. They were talking how the laws were so not up to date that they had legally enough boats. It took 1,500 people to die to start changing the laws. Original drawing has the second set of lifeboats, but they thought it wouldn't be needed until after the Titanic sunk. They figured maybe we should do that. Here we have a picture of the Carpathia. And that ship managed to rescue 712 passengers. Saying Molly Brown of the rowboats was the one that sort of took charge, told the women to row. And then when she got to New York, she paid for medals to be made of the crew of the Carpathia. There's one of the medals. On September 1st, 1985, after 73 years, the Titanic was discovered by Robert Ballard. It was a submarine named the Argo. It's crazy stuff like deck benches. These are the names of all the people that lost their lives and their ages. You can see how young some are. We have 15-year-olds, a 2-year-old. It's funny when you look at the list. All the screens are the same size, but you see first class, it's a bigger font with only 3 rows. Second class, a little bit smaller, 4 rows. And then you start seeing the third class. And then the crew. How many names of the people that were lost? So there you have it, folks. The Titanic exhibit here in New York. I liked it. I didn't know what to expect. At first I was very underwhelmed. But then I started realizing the way it was presenting it. They literally would show you a photo, tell you the story of an individual, see a possession of them, and like you sort of
got to learn more about the person.
It was humanizing the victims, is what I felt.
Yeah.
The people that lost their lives. You're hearing a story about a man, why he was on the ship, who he was there with, and then if he didn't make it. You were hearing of families that got split, half died. Like a woman lived and watched her husband and kids run to the other lifeboat, and she never saw them again. And it really. Even though they didn't have that many artifacts and like that many reconstructions, the way it presented the story, ending with the list of all the victims, was really, really good, really touching.
I do like that they were able to pull from like the sister ship, like what it would have looked like.
Yeah, so we saw like some of like the bathrooms, the back wood boards, lighting, some windows. I liked it. I've always been a fan of the Titanic since I was a kid. That guy Robert Ballard I mentioned.
Oh my god, putting the footage like in front of the movie Titanic?
I have books on this. I have books on the Lusitania. I have books on the Bismarck. I have tons of books on this stuff. It's what I used to want to do for a living. I dreamt of being a marine archaeologist. I went to college, my first time out of high school to major in archaeology. I failed my first archaeology course, the only course I've ever failed, and then I switched majors to photography. Well, I switched to athletic training, that wasn't for me, then photography. You get the idea. But I think we could call it.
I think so.
So, Titanic the Exhibition, been there, done that. Remember, folks, safe travels
Good eats.
and live life.